Welcome to Art Bazaar, a podcast that chats with artists of all types to explore the depths of creativity. Brought to you by the Alternative Gallery. We'll be releasing new episodes every Wednesday with bonus episodes dropping randomly. If you like what you're hearing, you can support this podcast by going to thealternativegallery.com and clicking on the podcast tab. I'm your host, Brandon Wunder, creative director of the Alternative Gallery, a non-profit arts organization in Allentown, PA, run through the efforts of dedicated volunteers. On this special episode of the Art Bazaar Podcast, I'm going to be talking about how art can save America. We'll look at some issues that artists face in this country, and more importantly, how we'll overcome them. I'll be talking about our upcoming Artist Takeover at the Americus Hotel on Thursday, November 21st, and encouraging you to set up similar events. So let's get right into it. After an extremely divisive election, many of us are left wondering what's next. Although I don't intend to make this an episode about politics, it's impossible to speak about some of the issues we face without addressing certain things. As to leave absolutely nobody wondering or thinking I'm being cryptic about something, I'm going to come right out and say it. I'm extremely unhappy about the results of the presidential election. I think it will, with great likelihood, harm a number of different communities within this country and harm the country as a whole in meaningful ways. And that's the simplest way I can put it for now. I also think it's going to make things at least a little bit more difficult for artists. And I want us to prepare for that and know now that there are things we can do to make sure we keep art vital to our lives, to be able to keep creating and in the process build thriving art communities. And of course, I feel art has the potential to save this country and put us on the right path. First, we're going to spend some time talking about where we are right now and how we got here. I'll touch upon the problems, but I'll spend a lot more time talking about the solutions. This episode is going to be stuffed with things we can do and a call of action or two. Where does the United States stand in 2024? In order to fully understand where we're at, it's sometimes helpful to give context by looking at things globally. We'll start pretty much with the most important trait of any country, our health. The United States ranks 19th place in healthcare among the developed nations of the world. The richest country to ever exist doesn't even have a top 10 healthcare ranking. This system creates conditions for severe health problems among our citizens and crippling debt for families. The poor quality of our healthcare system is at least partially attributed to the next item, something we're going to spend a good amount of time discussing, and that's education, which the United States ranks 18th in the world. Once again, not even in the top 10 of developed nations. Our literacy rate is only 79% in adults, and 54% of adults in the U.S. read below a 6th grade level. And before anyone says that the rate of illiterate adults is likely due to immigrants, only 34% of adults lacking literacy proficiency were born outside of the U.S. That means 66% of illiterate adults in the U.S. were born in the U.S. The Century Foundation estimates that the U.S. is underfunding K-12 public schools by about $150 billion per year. And of course, schools with higher concentrations of Latino and Black students are much more likely to be underfunded than districts with majority white students. The price of an undereducated nation costs the United States at least $192 billion a year. How is this number determined, you might ask? The undereducated mainly only qualify for low-paying jobs, which in turn produces less income tax for the federal government. The U.S. government giving adequate funding to public schools would in turn save it over $40 billion per year, not to mention making us far more competitive on the world stage. Now, some might say that $40 billion is nothing to the government, but that number balloons quickly when you start to take into account the other areas affected by lack of education. Other consequences of a lack of proper education include poor health, shorter life expectancy, poverty, unemployment, lower salaries, gender inequality, and a poor economy, just to name a few. Very quickly, we begin to see the domino effect that a lack of proper education creates. Clearly, there is an education crisis in this country which is taken far less serious than it should. If you look at the poorest areas of the nation, they are also the least educated. And it's no secret that poor states vote conservative and wealthy and educated states vote liberal. It is sometimes referred to as the Great Education Divide and is truly one of the leading factors to where we are today. A lack of education also makes it much easier for disinformation to spread freely. This allows for some very dangerous scenarios if there are actors looking to take advantage of that. And that is absolutely where we find ourselves in this moment in America in November 2024. Some have gone as far as to call what's happening in the United States as the early stages of fascism. Now, to many, that sounds extreme. But I'd like to share a detailed breakdown of what political scientist Dr. Lawrence Britt wrote about fascism back in 2003, after studying the fascist regimes of Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, Suharto, and Pinochet. Dr. Britt found they all had 14 elements in common. He calls these the identifying characteristics of fascism. And I'm going to read them all to you because I think they're very important and relevant. The 14 characteristics are: number 1, powerful and continuing nationalism. Fascist regimes tend to make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen everywhere, as are flag symbols on clothing and in public displays. Number 2, disdain for the recognition of human rights. Because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of need. The people tend to look the other way or even approve of torture, summary executions, assassinations, long incarcerations of prisoners, etc. Number 3, identification of enemies/scapegoats as a unifying cause. The people are rallied into a unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or foe. Racial, ethnic, or religious minorities, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists, etc. Number 4, supremacy of the military. Even when there are widespread domestic problems, the military is given a disproportionate amount of government funding, and the domestic agenda is neglected. Soldiers and military service are glamorized. Number 5, rampant sexism. The governments of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Under fascist regimens, traditional gender roles are made more rigid. Opposition to abortion is high, as is homophobia and anti-gay legislation and national policy. Number 6, controlled mass media. Sometimes the media is directly controlled by the government, but in other cases, the media is indirectly controlled by government regulation or sympathetic media spokespeople and executives. Censorship, especially in wartime, is very common. Number 7, obsession with national security. Fear is used as a motivational tool by the government over the masses. Number 8, religion and government are intertwined. Governments in fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Religious rhetoric and terminology is common from government leaders, even when the major tenets of the religion are diametrically opposed to the government's policies or actions. Number 9, corporate power is protected. The industrial and business aristocracy of a fascist nation often are the ones who put the government leaders into power, creating a mutually beneficial business-government relationship and power elite. Number 10, labor power is suppressed. Because the organizing power of labor is the only real threat to a fascist government, labor unions are either eliminated entirely or severely suppressed. Number 11, disdain for intellectuals and the arts. Fascist nations tend to promote and tolerate open hostility to higher education and academia. It is not uncommon for professors and other academics to be censored or even arrested. Free expression in the arts is openly attacked, and governments often refuse to fund the arts. Number 12, obsession with crime and punishment. Under fascist regimes, the police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws. The people are often willing to overlook police abuses and even forego civil liberties in the name of patriotism. There is often a national police force with virtually unlimited power in fascist nations. Number 13, rampant cronyism and corruption. Fascist regimes almost always are governed by groups of friends and associates who appoint each other to government positions and use governmental power and authority to protect their friends from accountability. It is not uncommon in fascist regimes for national resources and even treasures to be appropriated or even outright stolen by government leaders. Number 14, fraudulent elections. Sometimes elections in fascist nations are a complete sham. Other times, elections are manipulated by smear campaigns against or even assassination of opposition candidates, use of legislation to control voting numbers or political district boundaries, and manipulation of the media. Again, this was written in 2003, and it's more relevant today than the day it was written. I'm going to put a link in the show notes for anyone who might be interested in reading it again, or more importantly, sharing it. So really, what it comes down to here is we need to massively improve access to education in this country, and do so very quickly. First, we must understand that there is a range of education. It's not just traditional schooling. Some of the most brilliant people of all time learn completely on their own. There are so many ways we can create better access to education in this country. And we also have to be completely honest with ourselves. The public education system in this country isn't going to suddenly be fixed in a matter of days or weeks. So what can we do about it? I'm a believer that nonprofits should do the work that government isn't, because government moves slow, even when it is moving in the right direction. And it's up to us to jump in and make things work. It's very important that all of you out there know nobody is coming to help us. That's terrifying information to get, I know. Let it rip you apart for a few minutes if necessary. But then pull it together and do something useful with that information. Me saying that nobody is coming to help certainly doesn't mean that nobody cares and that nothing can be done. What I mean is that if by magic the solution will not just show up and all will be well, we're going to have to work for that shit. I've developed what I call the trash theory, which is this. We go outside and we see trash that someone threw on the ground. Most people walk by it not thinking to pick it up, as they weren't the ones who put it there. If enough people think that way, the trash never gets cleaned up, and we all live in a world with trash everywhere. Instead, we need to adjust our perspective ever so slightly. We see that trash. We know we didn't throw it there, but we also know that this is a shared society. So indirectly, that trash is ours, and we're compelled to pick it up. If enough of us felt that way, there would be no trash. The point here is we all have to do our part. We all have responsibilities to make this work. We should not be waiting and hoping for someone else to come along and pick up the trash. Yes, some will not do their part, which is why we must be willing to do ours and pick up the slack of others. Imagine the power behind that when society at large embraces that spirit and begins to work together. The power of community collaboration is how we accomplished anything as a species to begin with, and is always the force that takes us to the next stage. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to go look around your community. You're going to take note of what types of nonprofits and organizations are out there. Many of them will be in need of volunteers and support. Consider getting involved with one of them. Maybe in the process of looking at your community in this specific way, you notice there's a lack of support for a certain need, like, say, homeless shelters or music programs. Not saying you have to be the one to create the space that resolves that issue, but knowing there's a need and being able to communicate it to others is a huge step to making any kind of change. Also, be very thorough before determining that a new space or program may be needed. As an example, a few years back, the Alternative Gallery was considering doing an event where we would hand out food for Thanksgiving. During our discussions about this, one of our members noted that they volunteer at a food bank and there's always a lack of volunteers. So it was actually more efficient for our volunteers to help there as opposed to creating an entirely new program. Often, it's more important to support what already exists than creating a new one. It's only when the existing organizations are operating near full potential can we really make the most out of new ones. So before you decide to create something, make sure you're looking at the needs of the organizations that already exist. I've spent a lot of time talking about education, and I want to stick with that for a moment yet. How can we help with educating our youth outside of the public school system? One way is after-school programs, which can exist in so many varieties. Different community centers and nonprofit groups offer school children programming and support. This could be in the way of helping with homework, reading, or even teaching them a life skill such as using tools or how to research a subject. I think technology is also a big one. Kids love technology. We can use this to our advantage. One of the things I'd love to do is create a program that teaches children how to make their own video games. That's something they'll find very engaging, and it will require them to learn a range of skills involving computers, animation, programming, and more. And something that serves as its own form of education, offers its own structure, is art. I cannot overstate the power art can have on the developing mind of a child. Art is so powerful, the mere viewing of it has the power to change us. Studies have shown that students who visit museums have higher test scores, a greater sense of social responsibility, and an increased appreciation of the arts. The engagement with the arts is even more profound. Many studies have shown that practicing an art form leads to greater cognitive development in students. Something like music training increases the neural connections associated with creativity, decision-making, and complex memory. Obviously, the benefits of practicing an art form extend far beyond mere creation. Our country will be better able to solve problems and communicate if we practice art in a larger capacity. It's easy to see how having an enjoyable art class in school can make other classes and subjects easier for children, regardless if they were pursuing a career in the arts or not. And this is a big thing. So many people think that children should only really spend time learning an instrument or creating artwork if they intend to do so as a career. There are clear benefits simply to engaging in the arts at an early age. With all of these positive effects art has on us, why don't we talk about art as a form of education? That's at least partially so because arts-related programming and curriculum are often the first to go amid budget cuts in schools. The arts aren't as vital to the minds and future of our children as math or science. The technical is always favored over the creative in the education system here in the United States. Now that we know a little bit about the benefits of art to students, how can we increase access to it? Again, we cannot wait around for public schools to bring back regular art classes, nor can we push for private schools where those that need the education most are unlikely to afford it. We must create opportunities directly in the neighborhoods and communities where they are most needed. One of the ways the Alternative Gallery has attempted to offset the problem is by offering free art classes to our neighborhood children. While these classes are open to any children, we put a special focus on our neighborhood as it suffers from extreme levels of poverty and many of the children come from broken homes. These are the kids in our city who need art classes the most. Many of the children we've dealt with have behavioral issues. We've watched a number of children grow over the years and become more centered and focused, at least in part because of the art classes. They love coming to our building, and we use it as both a reward and a form of punishment. Telling the kids they'll be kicked out of class and not allowed back until next week has been a great tool for motivating them to behave. Those in class who aren't working on art have to leave. This ensures that the kids who want to focus on creating have the ability to do so, and those who aren't as interested will either begin to focus more or no longer be able to attend the classes. Sometimes it takes months or even years for a child to break through and become more focused. We also have a range of live music shows at the gallery which the children love coming out to, especially since we have a strong focus on making our shows all ages. Again, think of the positive effects on the brain of a child when they're able to engage in live music. This is yet another motivating factor for the neighborhood kids to behave. After enough time, this begins to offer a sort of structure for the children that they may not get in other aspects of their lives. I'm a big believer that art naturally makes people more curious. Do you ever read a book and start to feel your neurons firing, and you get this warm sensation through your body, your mind feels more focused, you seem to be able to analyze the world more clearly? This can happen after reading for only a few minutes. The same is true with children engaging in the arts and, of course, with reading. A child who likes to read will seek out books and subjects on their own. If art is a bad word to some, maybe we can instead push the word curiosity. We need our children to be more curious. They will naturally seek things out when so. Now, we know how art can lead us to a better future, but how can we use art to fix things today? The answer is taking part in community groups. The generic expression, There is power in numbers. Couldn't be more true. And I'll give you a quick example. After World War II, the U.S. economy skyrocketed, leading to many high-paying jobs. This meant that only one person in the household had to work. This was more than sufficient to meet the cost of living in most cases. Because of this, people tended to have free time and were able to get involved with various social organizations and fraternal groups. These groups were pretty much in every city and town across the country. Not only did these groups have large membership numbers, but the members were active. It gave the groups a lot of power within their communities. When politicians were running on the local or even federal level, they'd have to work to get the support of these groups. Their campaign would never win an election without it. And so, this was an era where politicians had no choice but to listen to the needs of the people and deliver. As wages began to stagnate in the 1970s, it often became necessary to pick up overtime work, and in many cases, both parents might be working now. This led to a lack of free time and a massive fall-off in the active memberships of social organizations. The organizations began to lose their power, and politicians stopped listening to their needs. This was a turning point in recent U.S. history where politicians began to turn their focus to special interest groups and not the will of the people. And this is precisely what we need to fix if we are to correct anything in this country. Why is this important? And why am I talking about all of this on an arts podcast? I think artists should be paying attention to what's happening in society in general, because the arts have the power to change society. Art isn't just about making pretty things. We're not just the decorators and entertainers of the world. We are the curious ones who help make sense of the human experience and even dictate where society goes. I know in American culture, the artist is often seen on a lower rung of the ladder. But think about it. Art shapes society. So much of how humans think, act, and even in what they desire is shaped by the arts. Music, movies, video games, books, even cartoons. Artists are truly the main drivers of culture and expression in this world. Yet we're not seen as so because there's an overly inflated importance placed on the businessman. And the arts are often diminished to simply a commodity that really doesn't make that much money for anyone, unless you're a world-renowned artist. As artists, we have similar interests that often extend beyond geography, race, or even religion. Art can be a unifying factor, and it should be used to help gather and organize people. This is precisely the point behind our Artist Takeover events. For those of you who aren't aware of these events and are wondering what an Artist Takeover is, it's a gathering of as many artists as possible from any and all mediums. The point is to come together and get to know each other. We don't set up vending tables or have any sort of activities planned. It's free of structure to allow artists a chance to just hang out and talk with one another. It's been an incredible way for different artists in our community to meet and take the first steps towards collaboration. We only hold these events in independently owned small businesses. Our main location here in Allentown has been the historic Americus Hotel, which is independently owned and not a part of a chain. The key word here is independent. There needs to be a much bigger focus on supporting small business in this country. Let's uplift the underdog and push back against the corporate giants. And notice how it's not called an artist meetup or an artist networking event. Even though those terms do describe what an artist takeover is, we feel they lean too much into the business side of things, which is not what's important here. Of course, we want our creatives to make money and see these gatherings as a step to making that happen, but that's almost an unintended side effect of it. We want artists to unite and work together to help bring change to our world. As an exaggeration, we want to see artists take over the world. While the focus is getting artists out, these events are not exclusively for artists. Anyone is welcome to join us at these events. The name Artist Takeover is a call to action for artists simply to show up. And here's the thing about being involved in something. It can't happen unless you show up. There are always reasons to not come out. We all need to make more of an effort to attend in-person events. And even in those cases where you can't come out, you should still be working like hell to make sure others are. Too often we dismiss something because we ourselves cannot attend. There are likely people you know who would benefit from something like an artist takeover, even if you can't make it. So what to expect from our next Artist Takeover, which is happening Thursday, November 21st, 6 to 9 p.m. at the Americus Hotel in downtown Allentown. As always, there is going to be a large gathering of creators from an assortment of artistic mediums. We're aiming to bring out at least 100 artists at this upcoming event because there's a major need for change in this country, and it's time for the artists to have a big part in that. One of the things we've noticed in the past is that all these great conversations are taking place, but there isn't as much follow-up as there should be. Artists are getting excited and wanting to do things, but then not turning that into action. That's what we're focusing on this time. We're going to make sure that we have an artist sign up so we have info of artists who attend it. We need the ability to reach out to those who may not follow up on their own. Sometimes all we need is a little push. We're also putting together a takeaway for every artist to leave with, which is basically just a sheet of paper talking about why we held the event, what next steps to take, and resources to keep the movement going. It would be nice to find a way to track evidence that things are working after meetups, to show that people are actually doing something. I cannot stress enough how important the follow-up is. It's all about the follow-up. As for the future of these events, my goal is to have artist takeovers organized in all 50 states. Obviously, this is going to take a lot of planning and collaboration to put together. And we're not just talking about big cities and towns that need these events. Creatives everywhere need events like this. Sometimes the smaller a town is, the more this is needed. So we're very open to where we host these events. If you're interested in working with us to set up artist takeover events, either in the Lehigh Valley or somewhere else, please reach out to us. This is all about getting organized. I'm currently working to set up artist takeovers in New Jersey and Baltimore. If you're in these areas, keep checking our social media accounts and the Alternative Gallery's website for info about when those are happening. If you're looking to set up your own artist meetups, remember, the name of the game here once again is independent. Hold these meetups at small businesses, not chain restaurants. Make sure that money is going to a good place and actually supporting people within your community. And whenever possible, try to put together a small group of people to work with you on this. It's much easier to do something when you're able to work with someone else. And I'd like to note, if you're an artist who's just starting out, or maybe you feel your work isn't developed enough and you're waiting to reach out to galleries and spaces because of it, my advice to you is don't wait. Let those galleries and spaces know about you. It's easier for an artist to find out about a gallery than it is for a gallery to find out about a new artist. Put yourself on the radar. Come out to events even if you don't think you're ready to. This is especially true with the upcoming Artist Takeover. We are not calling for only professional artists to join us. We want creative folks of all types. Even if you haven't created art in a long time or have never created art. If these events sound interesting to you, I can't stress enough that you should be coming out. Because a truly free society is one that strongly supports the arts. It's open-minded and interested in exploration. We are a species that learns by trial and error who needs to continue learning from our experiences. Also, I think it's essential to point out that these things I'm pushing for are not just a reaction to where we are today. This is what we should have been doing the whole time anyways. I feel we ended up where we did because not enough of these things were being done. And I want to emphasize that you do not need money to enact change. The only resources you need are the power of communication and a little bit of time. Do not fall prey to your self-defeating thoughts that you can't do something about it, and understand that setbacks are inevitable. It's all part of the process, so make some art and save the world. And remember, it's all about the follow-up. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Art Bazaar.